Hello, my name is Lorelei McBroom. I have done vocals for Pink Floyd, the Rolling Stones, Nile Rodgers, Lou Reed, and Rod Stewart. I created Who Influenced You to chronicle a genealogy of inspiration from one generation to the next. We will cover all fields of interest, from sports to science, art to fashion, music to drama. Who influenced you?
Bruce Lee! From the top, that's where we heard Bruce Lee!
All right, I wanted to say hello, Marcia. Thank you so much for joining me today. This is really special for me.
Thank you for having me, Lorelei, little sis.
Yes, as many of you may or may not know, Marcia McBroom-Small is my eldest sister. She's one of my very first influences in so many ways. And so I thought, since I've talked about singers who've influenced me and touched very lightly on she and my other sister Dana's influence, I thought I would speak to Marcia directly. First of all, I would like to tell you, just in case you don't know, some of the ways that you've influenced me that really had a major impact on me for many, many years. Besides the fact that I obviously admire you for being a beautiful woman, for being a dancer, an actress, a model, an activist, I loved the fact that you were always wearing bright colors, joyful colors, an expression that was elegant and yet full of life. And that's always stayed with me, of wanting to have that in my style. People always talk to me about how colorful my clothes are, how colorful my jewelry is, etc. So that's a direct link to you.
Wow, that's fabulous. That's fabulous because, believe it or not, when I was first raised, we were always told to wear very muted colors, very toned down colors. And then I met a singer from Yugoslavia named Dunja Rajta. And she said, with your beautiful skin, you should be wearing bright colors. That's, who you are. And so then I started venturing into bright colors and very, very happy. And then I remembered Naomi Sims, who was a famous African-American model. She always said, with our dark skin, we should think of wearing white, especially in the summertime, could have that beautiful contrast between the white clothing and our dark skins. So that was really wonderful.
The fact that you were modeling in the 70s, way before where we're at now, where it's rather common that when advertisers put together a piece, they have diversity, they have at least some kind of Black model. But back when you were modeling in the early days, I know that it must have been quite different. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
And in those days, you had to be, we call it high yellow, to even think of modeling. As a matter of fact, my mother, Marie Lee McBroom, told me that when she was a young woman, she wanted to be a model. And there was this famous school called the Barbizon Modeling School. So she went down thinking, wow, can I be a model? And she said they were sending her from one office to the next. And she was thinking, oh, how exciting. They wanted to see her. But then she found out they just sent her around the building just to laugh at her, to say, who the hell does this dark-skinned girl think she could be a model? So I was amongst the first group of dark-skinned models who were out there making a statement. Because as I said before that, you had to be very light-skinned to even consider modeling.
Right.
As a matter of fact, that's when I first met Grace Jones, because she's from Jamaica. My mother's side of the family is from Montserrat. And so we had that Caribbean connection. And she had gone to some top agency and they had the nerve to tell her she was too Black to sell used cars.
Oh
And so
my
she said,
God.
yep.
Hmm.
Yeah. And so she said to me, Marcia, you know what? I'm going to go to Europe. I'm going to make a name for myself and I'll come back here and we'll see who's too Black to do what. And I've always admired her for that, that she didn't let that put her down. She said, I'll show you who can do what.
Right,
Mhm.
right. Well, for my listeners that don't know, Marcia and I have a different mother. Marcia's mother was his first wife. And they lived in New York and raised Marcia and my other sister, Dana, in New York. So clearly, even though we had different mothers, there's a definite connection between most of the girls in our family in that we've pursued this entertainment fantasy that became a reality for us. And I definitely attribute a certain aspect to your mother, given that she was also an entertainer, being a concert pianist and whatnot. Can you tell me a little bit about how she influenced your interest in entertainment?
Well, it's interesting because my mother, as you mentioned, was a concert pianist, a classical pianist, but she also belonged to calypso groups and she actually played piano for Harry Belafonte when he first got started in the business. And so the arts were all around us all the time. For example, Max Roach was a cousin of mine. Connie Kay, who played for the Modern Jazz Quartet. He was a cousin of mine, also a drummer. So it is funny that I end up, when I did Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, I end up playing the part of a drummer in the movie.
He seemed to know his way around, and I thought I could have a sweet talking old candy man on this bed.
Art can imitate life, but we were always around entertainers. For example, my mom worked for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and so they used to always have big affairs for him at the armories around New York City. And Odetta would show up. I met Dorothy Dandridge, all of these incredible, Sidney Poitier, all of these incredible artists all the time. That was our life. We were always around artists. But I'll never forget at one of these events, Dr. King came over to me to ask me how I was doing. And here I was a little girl and I was like, oh my gosh, he's leaning over and asking me how I'm doing. And all these famous people are here around him. And so that really touched me deeply that he reached out to me as a child. But I must say, my mom always took my sister and I, and then later my sister Edie also, she would take us wherever she could to meet people. So we were always meeting heads of state, etc. And because we were usually the only children there, we got to get pictures with different famous people, and that was really fun. But I must say, one thing that was even more exciting is my grandmother, who was from Montserrat, sixth grade education, but very, very wise woman. She always said to us, no matter where you go, hold your head up, put your shoulders back, and walk in that room as if you belong there. And I would say the funniest example of that was one time we went to some reception and a famous civil rights leader came over to us, Whitney Young, to introduce himself to us. Because the way we walked into the room, he must have figured these women must be into something. I better go and introduce myself.
That's cute.
So that was very funny, very sweet. Our sister Laura sent me a copy of a letter that Daddy had received from Eleanor Roosevelt, apologizing that she could not come to his wedding. I didn't really know the extent that Daddy worked with Eleanor Roosevelt, because at that time, a lot of Americans don't realize, here it is, the American government is supposedly fighting the Nazis, and yet our army was still segregated. So
Right.
each division was according to your ethnic background. So they had a division, well, everybody knows about the Navajo code talkers. And then there was a division of just Puerto Rican military people, African Americans. And it was absolutely outrageous. And Daddy said he couldn't believe it. If they captured Nazi officers, they were allowed to eat in the same dining room with the American officers, where African Americans couldn't even eat there. So it's really wild. It's really wild. But having my eyes opened as a young girl, seeing all of these inequalities and these contradictions, and that people were not seen by the content of their character, but just by the color of their skin, has always been a great, great influence on me and how I see the world.
Well, you definitely were coming of age, so to speak, during the heyday of the civil rights era, in the sense that you weren't old enough to literally be marching with Dr. King, but you saw the uprising of the Black Panthers and a certain consciousness that was going through the Black community, where people were saying, we can do for ourselves. If you don't want to help us, we will help ourselves. And the fact that I
Right.
remember you telling me college at that point, the community colleges at least, they were free.
So that's another joke. I don't even know if you're aware of this, Lorelei, but Stokely Carmichael was also one of our cousins. And on my mother's side also, there was a famous activist from Guyana named Walter Rodney. He was also a cousin of ours, and he wrote a book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. And so here it was, as I said, we were right in the middle of it all. As a matter of fact, my mother was a travel agent. And so Dana and I used to go a lot to different African countries as tour leaders and hook up with the tour leaders in the various countries. So we went to this amazing Pan-African festival in Algeria when Eldridge Cleaver and H. Rap Brown and stuff were in exile from the United States. So we got to meet them in Algiers. So you could imagine being right there. But I must say, I was very angry because I said here they were being treated like royalty in Algeria, while some of our brightest and best were being gunned down by the cops here in the United States, just for standing up, just for wanting, as you said, to do for self. And that seemed like such a great threat. It's like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
Well, a lot of people that have been following me on Facebook and following our other sister Durga are quite aware of Daddy's background in terms of him knowing Eleanor Roosevelt, knowing Dr. King, debating Malcolm X, meant to be a speechwriter for Robert Kennedy. And as you mentioned to me, I'm often giving credit to my mother for her background as a piano player and so forth. And I really have not elaborated enough on Daddy's influence on all of us in terms of
Yes.
what I feel was the sense of self-confidence that he gave us all to be able to go
Yes.
out in the world and pursue our talents to the fullest and do it,
Yes.
you know, with the confidence that he was there to back us. And it was incredible. Certainly his talking about you and Dana, since we grew up on different coasts when we were very young, definitely made me want to be like my big sisters.
Yeah, I must say. And Daddy gave me a love for nature. It was so cute because he used to take us to the Bronx Zoo, for example. And I didn't know that he was just reading the plaque on the side of each animal cage of the different things about the various animals. So I'm standing there feeling, oh, I have the greatest daddy in the world. He knows all of these things about all of these different animals. This is just totally awesome. Only to find out when I got older that, oh, he was just reading the plaque on the side. But the fact that he even took the time to read it to us so that we got to know the animals and to be curious and to be sensitive. Like I'll never forget one time, I don't remember where we were. He caught a fish in his hands. And I was like, oh my God, Daddy, that's amazing. And he said, but the fish's mommy is missing him. So I'm going to let him go. And he let the fish go. And I thought, wow, he's always very sensitive like that. And we had a farm in Ohio. Our family had a farm in Ohio. And it was like a 200-acre farm. And I'll never forget when he first took me to the farm and I was on his shoulders and he didn't know. I was terrified of the cows because they were so huge. But I felt as long as my daddy's here and I'm on his shoulders, I could look down on the cows. But I was so upset when our family lost that farm because, again, one brother stayed on as a farmer and then ended up getting behind in taxes, not letting the rest of the family know, and then ending up giving up our farm for pennies on the dollar. So that was very sad. But I was happy that Daddy took me to the farm to see the farm and to meet our Uncle Herman, who was the one in charge at that time of the farm.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. I knew that Uncle
Yeah.
Herman did have property in California and he was raising
Yes.
hogs.
Yeah.
So now that makes sense. He had the background
Right.
for that. How did you get into dancing?
Okay, well, again, being middle-class African-American girls, right? It was considered the thing to do, that you take dance classes, you take music lessons, et cetera, you learn etiquette, et cetera, so that you can be anywhere in this world. So what happened was there were these twin sisters called the Facey twins. They were ballerinas. And we started studying with them ballet. And then I'll never forget it because I was just about to learn how to dance on point. When people started saying to me, oh, what's the use of that? There's nothing for African-American ballet dancers, so don't even go there. And so unfortunately, I kind of drifted away from ballet. But then I had another great teacher named Ann Garnett Green, and she was wonderful because she would teach us things like the Mexican hat dance, and we did a performance of Aida, et cetera, et cetera. And she was involved with the Negro Opera Guild. And again, a lot of people don't realize we had our own institutions because of segregation. So you had your own Negro Opera Guild, the same way we used to have our own African American baseball league. And so, and that's, as a matter of fact, that's part of the whole story of Bingo Long and the Traveling All-Stars that I ended up doing with Billy D. Williams. But then when my mother met Catherine Dunham, when we were teenagers, Miss Dunham said, wow, she was commissioned to do the choreography for the Metropolitan Opera House. And so she said she could work on us for that summer, like give us a crash course in her technique and everything, which meant 8 hours a day of dancing, 6 days a week, no playing around. And we had to audition for the production when it all came about in the fall. And we did it, but it was hard work because Miss Dunham was not fooling around. But what I loved about her, she had a very holistic approach to dance. So it was your whole life in terms of what you ate, how you presented yourself, everything. And we had some of the top dancers in her original company as our teachers. So that was extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary.
One quick question. What was it like dancing with Leontyne Price?
Well, it was such an honor to be on stage with these incredible opera singers. You could imagine Leontyne Price. It was another famous singer named Martina Arroyo, whom I didn't even know was a graduate of Hunter College. And it was just awe-inspiring to be on the stage with these women. And again, Leontyne was so down to earth because I met her years later. She came to my church because we had an opera group and she came to speak. And again, always very humble. She even wrote a book about opera for children. But that's what I love because we were teenagers at the time. All the opera stars were very sweet and very accessible for us. and but that sense of dignity that they always had, and to see their fans at the back door, leaving them flowers and everything. So
Mm.
it was just such a deep, deep honor. Joan Sutherland, Leontyne Price, Franco Corelli. I'll never forget, he was an incredible tenor. And I even bought some vinyls of him, of his singing the other day, because Dana and I had such a crush on him that we learned in Italian to tell him that his voice was like the music of angels.
Oh, that's so cute.
Yeah, yeah. So it was a deep, deep honor to be on stage with Leontyne Price and to know who she was, and to feel so humble to and grateful to have the opportunity to be on the same stage with her. And sometimes the performances were so beautiful that when the curtain dropped, the cast would applaud the singers. That's
Mm,
how deep it was. Yeah.
cool. Sometimes I get the impression that younger up and coming talent doesn't realize how truly important it is to have that type of discipline, and that
Yeah.
people who run into the opportunity, as you did, to be able to dance at the Met, how I did after 20 years of not touring, auditioning for Rod Stewart, and I had to learn 30 songs in 1 week, dancing,
Oh.
background vocals, all of it. But
Mm.
because I had the skill and I had the support of the other singers that really worked with me to get through it, I was able to get the job. But,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I get the impression sometimes that people see you on YouTube, or they know they can make their own YouTube video, or they can make their own independent record, but they don't understand that there's a whole lot of hard work that went into some of the greats. Like, take someone like an Aretha Franklin, grew up singing in church.
Right.
So all those years of being in
Right.
church were training. And then, touring,
Yes.
singing around when you did whatever community performances or tours, all of that's training. And then go out and start making
Yes.
records. Whereas a lot of people, whether they
Right.
be acting, whether they be musicians, singers, they want the attention and the fame so quickly that they're skipping a step. Or do you see that?
Oh, definitely. And what I thought was so amazing with Miss Dunham, for example, is that she said she did make mistakes with her first company that ended up causing them to have knee injuries and different types of injuries. So she said she did not want that to happen to us. And so I carried that through when, for example, she sent me out to the Midwest to teach her technique to other teenagers. And I was terrified because I said, Miss Dunham, these kids are my age. And she has a lot of pelvic movements and everything in her dance, in her choreography. And she said, you can do this. I know you can do it. And so she pushed me out there. As a matter of fact, after dancing for 5 seasons at the Metropolitan Opera House, she actually took me to Paris with my Aunt Evelyn, with my little sister Edith, my little cousin Yvonne, and we were in a show called Deux Anges Sont Venus. And so here it is, I got a chance to live in Paris for 6 months. And I had to understudy a woman named Trina Parks. And Trina, honey, she was a fierce dancer. I admired her so much. So Miss Dunham said, well, you're her understudy. And I'm like, oh no, I don't think I could dance like Trina. And she said, well, you better learn that dance because you never know. And you are her understudy. So here it is. I studied her dance and everything. Wouldn't you know, one day Trina comes in hobbling into the theater. She had twisted her ankle. And so it was like, oh my God, I had to go out there and do Trina's dance. And I'll never forget this. It's as if it were yesterday. I was standing in the wings. The theater is packed. And I have on my costume and everything. And all of a sudden, literally, someone just pushed me out on the stage. And so, of course, but I did the dance. I did it beautifully. But that's what I loved about Miss Dunham. She always seemed to see more in her dances than even we could see in ourselves. As a matter of fact, it was so funny because people would admire these incredible dances, choreography she did. And to me, her dances were always like a minute or two longer than the body could endure. But the only thing that kept us going was the thought of embarrassment of collapsing on stage in front of an audience, a theater full of people. So you just found another boost of energy to get through those last few minutes and dance off of that stage, and everybody was, screaming with delight, not realizing like, wow, she really took us to the limit of what we could do. Another thing that was interesting, that here she was working with the corps de ballet of the Met. So these were top ballet dancers. And yet for them to learn her technique, it was so difficult for them. And that's when I got to respect more her choreographer, her style of dance, which was like a conglomeration of different ethnic dances from different cultures that she studied so well, because she was an anthropologist. And it's interesting because I ended up majoring in anthropology also at Hunter College when I went to school. But again, learning about the different dances and the different techniques and how you hold yourself, and having respect for the movements and what they mean, and you have to embody that. So it's like with deep respect, because a lot of times when people see like African dance or whatever, they think, oh, it's no big deal, but it is a big deal. It is a very big deal in terms of what muscles you're using, the endurance of the dance, the meaning of the dance, which is so vitally important. And that's why I get upset with young people when they don't know any of the history or the background, and they just think, oh, it's just shaking your booty or something. And they don't understand the significance of what they're doing or why you're doing it. You see, that's the thing. We have to study more and learn more and take it seriously. It's not a joke.